Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a little bit different for me because I'm going to be doing a quarterly stats update and best and worst of the year so far. I know a lot of people do this. I think I've most recently have seen Books and Lala has done hers, and Meg with Books has also done hers for the year. Normally I haven't done these videos, but at this point of the year I would typically be doing a spring unhaul as like a spring cleaning kind of a thing. But I just did a massive unhaul right before moving, and I really think I have reached a point with my TBR shelves, which I'm gesturing because they're on that side of the room. I think I've reached a point with those where I'm really happy with where they're at. I do still have a huge number of books on them, but everything on the shelves is something that I feel confident is something I at least want to try, and everything on my red shelves directly behind me is something that I feel strongly enough about to hold on to. So I didn't really see a need to do a spring unhaul this year and thought I would give this kind of a video a try instead. So we'll talk about the stats first, and then I think I'm going to talk about my kind of two worst books of the year so far, two that surprised me or were things that I ended up enjoying more than I thought, and then my two best books of the year. So diving into the stats, I have currently read 17 books so far this year, and I am including the two that I read here at the beginning of April because those were both volumes of manga, so I feel like those don't skew the stats like too badly. So I've read 17 books so far, almost 4,100 pages. It's 4,096, so very, very close. I've listened to 4 hours of audiobook. In terms of audiobooks, I've only read one of those so far this year, and I will, somewhere in here, I'm directionally challenged with this camera, but I'll put the pie chart up here somewhere. But so far this year, I've read one audiobook, which pretty much tracks for me because I'm not a huge audiobook reader. There are a few things that I always listen to on audiobook, like I will be listening to the new Riley Sager on audio later this year, but for the most part, I'm not really an audiobook girly. It just doesn't really work for the way that my brain processes information, and I really have to have something very like tedious to do with my hands while I'm listening, or else I don't focus, and it has to be a pretty good narrator that's going to keep my attention. So I don't really read a lot of audiobooks overall, so having one so far this year pretty much tracks for me normally. I then have read 5 ebooks, which I think is actually down from where I was last year. I think I read a lot of ebooks last year, and I've been making an effort this year to read more physical books, which is working out so far for me this year because I've read 5 ebooks, but I've read 11 physical books. So I'm pretty happy with that split. I am trying to read more of my physical TBR because those are the ones that like actually take up space. And I know that if I don't love a book, I'm not going to hold on to it. So trying to get through those feels like it makes sense to me so that I can figure out what actually needs to continue taking up space in my home. So I'm pretty happy with the spread on like formats that I'm reading. I think that I'm reading a nice blend of physical and ebook with that kind of bent towards physical to try and read down my actual like owned books. Speaking of owned books, the next category I have in my stats is where I read the books from. And I feel like, again, I'm pretty happy with the split we have here. So I read 8 of my owned books. Those are things that were on my shelf prior to the start of the year, and I have read 8 of them. So of the 17 books I've read, more or about half, slightly less than half, have come from my owned prior to the beginning of 2025 list. Then I also have 4 new books that I've read, and that is books that I have acquired since the beginning of the year and have also read. So more than half of the books I've read overall are books that I own physically, and I'm really happy with that. That's good progress for me. Then I also have 2 library books that I've read, both of which have been ebooks that I've gotten through Libby, and I've read 2 ARCs this year, which I'm actually a little bit behind on ARCs. I need to be picking up my pace a little bit with those because I have quite a few ARCs I need to get to, and my ratio just dipped a little bit because I got approved for like 2 more that I was interested in. So I want to get my ratio back up. And I have several ARCs that are things that came out like a couple of years ago that either I got the ARC ahead of time and just didn't get to it in time, or I actually have one there too that I got a year after it had come out. The publisher randomly sent me the ARC, I think maybe because the second book was about to come out, so they were trying to push interest in the series. But yeah, I have a few, like 4 or 5 ARCs for things that have already come out that I would like to try and prioritize. So I really want to get that ARC number up as well. In terms of how I've been feeling about books I've been reading, I'm really happy with how my star ratings are looking right now, because for a few years there I felt like I was only reading things that I was rating like 4 or 5 stars, and it just wasn't enough variety. It wasn't really giving me an opportunity to feel out what I like and don't like within the genres that I typically read, and it wasn't representing me like branching out at all. So I've been trying to branch out more, reading things more outside of my comfort zone and reading things more broadly even within genres I typically read, but looking more into different subgenres that I'm less familiar with. And so I've been getting kind of last year and this year into more books that I'm rating lowly, which I think is actually really a positive thing. I think for me it it's great that I'm reading more things that I am not enjoying, because it does give me that opportunity to hone in on what do I actually like in a book, what do I actually not like in a book, but also it gives me a chance to, experience different kinds of stories. Even if I don't end up liking something, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. A lot of times it's just that it's not clicking for me as a reader. It's very rare that I will ever say a book I've read is like just straight out bad. So for me, it's that kind of discovery opportunity represented in the stars that I'm giving to books, if that makes any sense at all. I don't know if that was very rambly, but yeah, I've had a few. Let me see, what's the lowest one? I've done 2 stars. It was my lowest this year. I haven't given any 1 stars yet this year, but I've given 1 2-star, 1 3-star, 3 3.5 stars, 5 4 stars, 2. Okay, it's not in order. Okay, that's really helpful. So let me back up. 1 2-star, 1 2.5 star, 1 3-star, 3 3.5 stars, 5 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 4 5 stars. So I'm pretty sure those 2 of those 5 stars are also manga, which I rate a little bit differently. So I kind of don't count those in the same way. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I like that you can see that I am trying things and pursuing books that I wouldn't normally read, and also being willing to read them to the end, even if I'm not having a great time. I will DNF if I'm just absolutely miserable, but I think a lot of times, even books that I'm not personally liking, I still get some value out of them. I think it's a positive experience overall, so I'm liking that I'm actually like sticking with some of the books that I'm not liking as much, and getting some value out of them, even if it's not enjoyment value, if that makes sense. If we look at my genre spread too, that's another kind of indicator that I've been branching out a little bit. Not a ton, because my most read genres are fantasy, which tracks, horror, which tracks, that's my typical. I've had 6 fantasy, 4 horror, and then I think typically crime or mystery is going to be the other one, and that's 2. So that's 6, 10, 12 of my 17 books have been in those 3 categories that I read a lot of. But I also do have 2 nonfictions, which is something I'm trying to read more of this year. I also had 2 graphic novels or manga, which I do read a little bit. And then I also have 1 contemporary book, which is completely outside of my wheelhouse. So I'm wanting to grow some of those other genre sections a little bit and read more broadly. I'm actually surprised there's not any sci-fi on here yet this year. So that's probably something I need to focus on moving into the second quarter of the year, because I have not been reading a lot of sci-fi. And I do really like sci-fi, but I'm a lot pickier with it than I am with fantasy. So it's another space where I need to kind of explore a little bit more. But overall, I like that you're seeing some of these other genres crop up, and it's not just fantasy, mystery, and horror. The last stat I want to mention is just the status of whether I've read from this author before. I feel like I've got a really nice split here. It's pretty even. 9 of the books I've read have come from authors I've read before, and 8 of the books I've read have come from authors I've never read before. So I feel like that's a really nice split. I do try to keep that close to 50-50. So I'm reading things that are from authors I love, and I'm kind of keeping up with series I enjoy, keeping up with the work of people whose writing I enjoy, but also that I'm branching out and I'm trying new authors, I'm trying new styles of writing, and I try to keep that around 50-50, and I seem to be doing that pretty well this year. So those are all the stats we're going to talk about. I'm not going to dig into any of the other stuff, because I feel like we could get very in the weeds with it. And I think now we'll talk about my most disappointing books, or at least one's kind of a disappointment, one's kind of the worst book I read this year. That's how it goes. And then we'll move in the more positive direction. We'll talk about worst and most disappointing, surprises, and best. And I think that'll leave us at a really nice positive note at the end. So the first book I have to mention here, my worst book of the year, is the one book I give 2 stars, and it was The Sunshine Court by Nora Sakavic. This is a book I went in knowing it was going to be probably 2 stars. I knew I was not going to have a good time with this book, or at least I wasn't going to have a good time in the sense that, the book is really good quality and I'm having a good time for that reason. I did have a good time with this book, but it's really bad. It is poorly written, it's poorly researched. In fact, I don't think Nora Sakavic knows what research is, but it's compelling. It is taking all of these different weird genres, putting them together, and refusing to meet any of the genre expectations for any of them. It's so completely its own thing, and I think, as my friend put it, it's art. You have to say that it's art. You might not like it, you might not think it's good, but you can't say that it's not art. It's so clearly a singular artistic vision that has gone into this work. It's clearly a passion project for the writer, and I appreciate it on that level. I like seeing somebody just fully go for this thing that they want to do. So I appreciate it on that level. It's just that it's poorly written and the story is not good. I actually dislike this one a little bit more than the original trilogy. This is the beginning of a spin-off trilogy from the All for the Game series, which is following a bunch of people who are playing a fake sport called Xe, and also the Yakuza is here for some reason. Don't ask me to explain that, I can't. But this one is a spin-off, I think undermines some of the theming in the original trilogy. So I do feel like this is weaker overall. I think that the original trilogy has that like very clear artistic vision, and this one feels a lot messier and a lot more like the author wasn't exactly sure where they were going with it. So I am interested to see what the rest of the spin-off series is going to be like. But yeah, this was my worst book of the year so far, and I'm not surprised that it is my worst rated book of the year so far. The other one I had here is Haunt Sweet Home by Sarah Pinsker, and I gave this one 2.5 stars, and I think this one is not so much a bad book, but a disappointing book for me, because this is one I listened to as an audiobook. This is the only audiobook I've listened to this year, and it's a story that on paper should have been something I loved. It's about a young woman who gets involved in a like haunted renovation TV show as a night production assistant as a part of her like grappling with being an adult and trying to figure out what path she needs to be on, because she feels like everyone around her is so good at being an adult. Like they all knew exactly what they wanted to do, so they've just like achieved everything they wanted, and she feels like totally out of place. So it's about her kind of grappling with that emotion and coming to see the effort and the work that goes into the position that the people around her have found themselves in. And I think that that like theme is really interesting, but I just don't think that the theme and then the content of the book with haunted renovations and there being actual ghosts, it just doesn't mesh. I don't get what the haunting aspect of the book has to do with the like imposter syndrome, self-doubt aspect of the book. I don't think those are brought together well, and given that it's a very, very short book, it's a 4-hour audiobook, it's under 200 pages, it feels like it just drags for the first 50%, nothing happens, and then everything just resolves way too quickly in the last half. So it's kind of structurally not a great book for me personally as a reader, and I think theming wise, it just didn't come together as well as it could have. So overall, this was just really disappointing for me because it was a book I was really excited for, but I would still try something else from Sarah Pinsker in future. Moving into biggest surprises, I had two to mention here, and I realized that they're different two than I originally set out to talk about. I misread my own spreadsheet, but the two things that I think have most surprised me this year are, first of all, Misery by Stephen King. I have had an okay experience with Stephen King previously, given that my only other book by him that I've read is It. And I think It is just way too damn long, and there's a lot of scenes in It that are just not necessary. I think it's fine. I thought the audiobook for It was fantastic. That was another one I did listen to on audiobook, and Steven Weber does an incredible job with the audiobook. So that was part of how I managed to get through It. It really helped like keep my attention focused on the story. But It was like, okay, I have kind of a mixed relationship with It, kind of love-hate relationship. So going into Misery, it had been recommended to me by one of my coworkers as a next possible step into Stephen King's kind of backlist, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew a little bit vaguely about the premise, but that was it. And I was really pleasantly surprised. I thought that this one, because it was so much shorter, I think worked better. It was a much better plotted story, and I thought it was really interesting that we're reading from the perspective of a character that I didn't think was particularly likable in a lot of instances. He's kind of a jerk, but I appreciated the way that the book made me empathize with him, and I think it also had some really interesting uses of imagery that caught in my mind. There are pieces that I still think about now, like months later after I read it. That was literally the first book I read this year, so it's a book that stuck with me in a way I wasn't expecting or anticipating, and I really saw, I think, in Misery for the first time why people think that Stephen King is a really good storyteller. Like, I thought it was really solid, I had a good time, and it's made me kind of reconsider my stance on not reading more Stephen King. I think I probably will read more from him in the future. I just wasn't expecting that outcome, and I was pleasantly surprised. The other big surprise for me was Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fato, which was only a surprise because it was a book that I requested as an ARC on a complete whim. I saw Stephen Graham Jones post about it and said that he really loved it, and I didn't know anything about the book. I just was like, okay, well, if he loves it, I need to try reading it. I sent the request, did not think I was going to get it. I got it, read it immediately, and I was obsessed with this. This was so good. This is following a woman who is starting a new job as a nanny for a group family in the countryside in England, and kind of, I think it's supposed to be like early 19th century, but she's this like very weird woman who has these violent tendencies and just doesn't really adhere to any of the typical social mores or norms. And from that vantage point of being kind of outside of society's bounds, she is like critiquing everything that this family is doing in this really insightful way. And I think it was also really funny was that like the family themselves are kind of weird. And so there's all of these very strange things happening and nobody is really commenting on it, and it's putting the reader in the position of the person who is reacting to everything, which I thought was really interesting in a really cool way to like dissect its themes about like societal pressures. So I had a great time with this. I wasn't sure what to expect going in, but I had so much fun. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Ultimately, the only thing that made me give it less than 5 stars was that I felt like at the end, it was clear that there was supposed to be some sort of message, like there was something I was supposed to be getting from the book, but I wasn't clear on what that was supposed to be. I felt like it had gone completely over my head, and so the confusion that it left me with was what made it a 4 star for me instead of a 5 star. That said, I would absolutely reread it, and I would definitely read more from Virginia Faytip as well. Moving on to my best books of the year, I realized I miscounted earlier. I actually have 3 books to talk about. I have 3 books that I gave 5 stars, but first I want to talk about a couple of honorable mentions that were books I did really enjoy that I wasn't, weren't quite 5 stars for me, but I did have a really good time with them. So one of those is Bury Your Gays by Chuck Tingle. I had like a minor quibble with the way that he represents one of his characters that kind of ruined that character for me just a little bit. It's this particular archetype I don't like, which is the supportive boyfriend man who is there just to be a supportive boyfriend and doesn't really get to do a lot on their own. I really liked the character. I wanted him to get more than that, and I just don't like that archetype anyway. So this one ended up being 4.5 stars, but it has some of the most anxiety-inducing horror I have ever read, and I really appreciated the conversations that Chuck Tingle was raising in this book. So I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it if you like horror. The other honorable mention is Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is the second book in the Anna and Den mystery series, or Shadow of the Leviathan series. Just fantasy murder mystery done so right, with this really great like Holmes and Watson duo. There's political stuff, there's cool science and magic, and it's just so much fun. I love these characters, I love the world that it's set in, and I am very much looking forward to future books in the series. So finally, moving on to those best books of the year, those 5 stars, I started off strong with The Serviceberry by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is a nonfiction, a very short nonfiction book about abundance and models in the natural world that suggest the possibility for relationships that aren't based on destructive consumption, the way that like capitalism is. And it's just a really interesting way of thinking about those ideas. I think that Robin Wall Kimmerer raises some really complex ideas because it's really sitting at this cross section of like economics and ecology and anthropology, and it's doing all of those things at once, but doing them really accessibly. She's just so good at explaining things in a clear, concise way and making you feel like you totally understand where she's going with what she's saying. So I just thought the writing was fantastic. It's also really beautiful writing for a nonfiction book, and I thought that the ideas that she was raising were really compelling and really hopeful, and I feel like it was just like the kind of book that I needed at the time that I picked it up. My next 5 star was The Lies of the Ajungo by Moses Osei Otomi, and this is a book that I was not expecting because I just picked it up on a whim. I saw Michael Kist raving about this book recently and happened to see that it was available at the library when I was looking for something to read, picked it up, read it, loved it. I read it in a single afternoon and I was crying at the end of it. It's so good. It's about a little boy named Tutu who is in this kind of transition period. He's about to turn 13, and that for him, within his culture, means he's kind of like moving into manhood. And it's this really important point, but he lives in a city where there is no water. And so he decides to undertake a quest kind of in this transitional period to try and find water for his people. And it's a book about him discovering that the way that he saw the world, his understanding of the world, is not at all accurate, and learning about like hierarchy and control and how figuring out how he can fight against it. And it's just so brilliantly written. It's beautiful writing. The characters are really great. I really like Tutu, but I also like all the supporting cast. He meets some really interesting people on his travels, and I just really appreciated the way that the author dealt with these big ideas around like power and control in such a clear, concise way in such a short book. Like, I think a novella is something that is really hard to get right, and Moses Osei like gets it so right in this particular book. It's just brilliant, and I feel like it should be required reading. It's just beautiful, and I love it so much, and I'm really excited to read the later books in the series. Finally, my last 5-star of the year so far is The Orb of Kairado by Katherine Addison. This is another spinoff from The Goblin Emperor, so it was pretty much guaranteed to be a 5-star for me. I love everything she's written in this world, and this particular one is a fun, kind of political mystery about a historian who was previously falsely accused of stealing an artifact, and then several years later, the death of his best friend leads him on a trail that allows him to figure out what actually happened all that time ago, and why was he targeted, why was he framed. So I really enjoyed that. I thought that the mystery was really fun. I really liked our main character, Ravenna. He was an interesting character because he had worked as a smuggler or worked with a smuggler for several years, and so had a lot of guilt around that impacted like how he approached doing different things throughout the story. I also like the way that he used his like knowledge as a historian to guide his decisions, and I just really enjoyed it. This has also an interesting discussion in it of like knowledge and access to knowledge, who deserves access to knowledge, and I really appreciated that piece of it, and it's just a fun time overall. It's just more goodness of the Goblin Emperor world. So, had a great time with it, but fully expected to have a great time with it. So that's kind of where I'm sitting for this end of the first quarter of the year. I feel like my reading is going decently well. I'd like to pick up the pace a little bit, but I've also started streaming this year, which has been taking up some of my time, and I've also been in a big crafting mood, so I've been trying to figure out how to balance those things, and so far I haven't quite figured it out, but it's definitely getting a little bit easier, and I'm having a good time doing all of it, so like I don't regret anything. So yeah, that's where we're at. Let me know down in the comments below how your reading is going so far this year, especially if you have a book that you've particularly loved, if you had any 5 stars this year. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, I hope you consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!